Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me Stern. If you've been following any of my videos, you'll know that we've been on a long track at drawing the Elden Ring bosses from the latest expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, and we've been doing so for a while now. Along that way, we've encountered a ton of terrifying beasts and turned them into Pokémon. But today, we are taking on the biggie. We are taking on the baddie. We are taking on a boss that you've been requesting since the first video dropped, and I think that it's time that I finally gave it to you. That's right, we are going to be taking on the boss of all bosses and putting everything we've learned to the test with promised consort Radahn. But to get warmed up for this end-all be-all of boss enemies, I first wanted to challenge myself with another enemy. One whose minions have become synonymous with Elden Ring. The first time that I saw these creepy little handy fingery things, my heart stopped, because if there's anything that we as artists fear, it's hands. So before we get to Radahn, I wanted to tease us a little bit, not with any finger, but with the mother of fingers. Also highly requested, Meteor, the mother of fingers, functions as the master and commander of all two fingers and finger creeps, and comes from beyond the stars themselves. Maybe it would fit better in my astrology series now that I think about it, but that's an issue for another day. The point is that Meteor and all finger creeps are meant to represent the more dark and twisted forms of the human body. Covered in deep fingerprint-like grooves and twirling amalgamations of phalanges, the mother of fingers at first seems difficult to transform into a Pokemon. But when doing these designs, I find that it becomes a whole lot simpler after breaking down the shapes and ideas. I have to make this Pokemon mostly hand, because that's the prompt after all, and I look to Pokemon like Pyukumuku and Barbaracle as inspiration. Both are designed after hands and also introduce a different vibe than other Pokemon in my opinion. So I started there, giving this Fakemon a body that appeared as a massive hand. I took into account the position and style of Meteor's face, which was meant to resemble a fingerprint, and used that to inform the focal point of the design. Using the fist-like shape and the rest of the hand, it almost mimics a fighter standing with crossed arms. For the legs, I simply went with another hand to give the overall motif that this is more than just one giant hand, but a creature comprised of several, twisted and molded together into some sort of monster. It may seem overly simplified to some, but the idea is never capture the exact parameters of the inspiration, but to be inspired by them, and I was inspired. I love the swooping shapes and rounded edges and what could have been a very creepy and disturbing design. I mean, look at this thing. But with the shape, language, and idea imitations brought into play by the melding of form and function, I thought that this one turned out pretty well and satisfies a rather difficult prompt. And so here is Phalangeist, a mix of the term phalanges, the anatomical name for finger bones, and poltergeist, which is not just a ghost, but a type of ghost known for manipulating physical objects. Thus, it's categorized as the manipulation Pokemon. Given Finger Creep's penchant for barreling into things in the cosmic lineage of the Mother of Fingers, I decided to make this Pokemon fighting ghost type, because I still want to capture the eerie and ethereal energy that comes when battling this boss, as well as the idea of this thing just pummeling you. It is a giant fist. It has a new ability that I'm calling Spectral Grasp. Physical moves have a 30% chance to disable the opponent's last used move for 2 turns. Additionally, Ghost-type moves gain a 20% increase in power. As goofy as this design may look, I think it's one of my favorites. And while I started by taking inspiration from hand-like Pokemon, I feel like I'm getting a lot of Wobbuffet vibes from this thing, and I dig that. I find that I often dig these really goofy Pokemon. Ever since Wobbuffet first came on the scene, I said that is my guy right there. So let me know in the comments down below what you think about Phalangeist. It is, again, one of my personal favorites. Since starting this series about a month and a half ago, I knew that I'd eventually have to make my way to Radahn, and I knew that it would take time to learn the lessons that I need to know to make it something that truly captures the energy and the indomitable spirit of this final boss. I've been listening to the comments and the chatter in our Discord about how to handle this, and I think that I've come up with something that really feels like it fits the energy of the character. Speaking of the Discord, don't forget that you can join our rapidly growing community there, and if you join by becoming a Ko-fi or Patreon subscriber, you'll gain the exclusive Pokemaniac role as well. You'll also gain discounts on commissions, first looks, and other fun perks. You can become a channel member too, here on YouTube, and see these videos the moment that they're uploaded, as well as get exclusive looks at some of the upcoming projects. One of those projects is going to be our Costa West region walkthrough that I'm very excited for. We've already finished our Route 1 Pokemon, as well as our starters, professors, and some of the other characters and NPCs that you may meet along the way. Joining any of these ranks gives you a shout out at the end of a video, but for the month of August, to celebrate the Ko-fi launching, any followers there will also be added to the shout out list. And with that, all out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into Radahn as a Pokemon. Very excited. I hope that you're as much looking forward to it as I am. When working on Radahn, I had to keep a few things into account. At first I thought about making him a centaur with inspiration from the Thundurus, Tornadus, Landorus line for the upper body, but I ended up scrapping that idea. Again, the idea is to capture the flavor of the prompt here, not just to recreate it fully, whether that be just the upper body or not. So I wanted to steer clear of making him just a man in armor, but still wanted to have the regality that came with feeling like a legendary. So I focused on the armor of Radahn itself. These tremendous golden lion heads that covered his chest and shoulders. I wanted to work out a way to integrate the flowing red cape and hair as well. Then, of course, there were the massive tusks that protrude from his helmet, and so I was kind of stuck with a problem here. I ended up settling on the idea of turning his armor into the Pokemon itself, making this tremendous lion. I was then reminded of the Barbary lion, this hulking beast driven to extinction. It was so large and ferocious that it was also called the Atlas lion. It felt like it was an Elden Ring boss itself. Unlike most male lions too, known for their manes that wrap around their neck, the Barbary lion's mane covered the shoulders and most of the torso, almost like the cape and mane of Radahn. If I was going to go the route of an extinct feline, that also kind of covered the tusks, as I began to draw inspiration from the Smilodon or saber-toothed cat. In the fight with Radahn, at the halfway point, Makila makes a surprise return to empower him, so I wanted to also take aspects of that bond into account with these spectral wisps that ride over the Pokemon's front limbs and along its sides. The paws I made appear more hoof-like to remind us of the horse in Radahn's first form prior to the expansion. With the power of Mog and the lion armor of Radahn and the spirit wisps of Makila, this Pokemon ended up having a lot more to it than just Radahn, and this became this tremendous balancing act of keeping these inspirations all intact and put together in a certain way. And it became this thing that was both a problem and something beautiful. I pictured the light wisps in animation for the game, transforming into the hulking scimitars we see in the boss fight, lined on either side of this legendary lion. I played too with the idea of him having one in his mouth, but it felt a little too Zessian for my liking, so I continued to play with some other ideas. If you watch my astrology series, you'll know that I recently did a lion Fakemon for the Leo sign, so I already kind of had lions on the brain, and I also had to find a way to make this feel unique and separate from that. So I went full horsepower into the ferocity element of this design, because the astrology symbols have a certain peace and serenity to them. So how could I make this different? Well, what if I drove into the ferocity? What if I made this thing feel dangerous? I decided that when doing the shading, I wanted to apply the shading on the upper part. So most Pokemon designs utilize a light down technique where the shadow comes from the bottom. Here, I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted it to feel almost like you were shining a torch and encountering this thing in a cave somewhere, or out in the open plains like you do with the actual Radahn fight at the end of Shadow of the Erdtree. So I took that into account and I made that a big play with the design, how the light itself characterizes this form. Ultimately, I think that what we came up with ended up being in the favor of this concept. It hit the flavor of the prompt without just reenacting it. And I believe that this design has the spirit of Radahn and feels like a legendary. I personally would love to have it on my team. I think when choosing the colors and how I wanted to go about kind of initiating the flow of energy, if that's kind of how we look at color, I wanted to stay away from stuff that felt too much like Pyroar. We have a lot of lion inspiration in Pokemon already, so how do I do that with the coloring? Well, I can not use some of the colors that we already see. I think using these blacks and yellows and reds and silvers really empower the design itself. And with that black mimicking the shadows, it really pulls a lot of that focus towards the front, towards the face of this thing. It has this huge volume of hair made to mimic the cape and the hair of Radahn, but utilizing the colors to focus all that forward, I think really allows this face, small as it may be in the grand shape of everything, feel like it is the focal point. When I look at the Elden Ring designs, I do notice that very often the central point is on the chest. It's on the main body, with the face being the smaller thing, almost like an afterthought. I know that's not the case, but it tends to be what I feel with it. The body itself, the hulking mass of the silhouette, tends to be the focus. And so I want that to be the case here, but also allow us to shine in on the face as well. So utilizing the shape of the hair and wrapping around most of the body like the Barbary lion, utilizing the shadows focused downward instead of upward like with most Pokemon designs. Gigantamax actually tends to do this as well, and I think it really adds a certain level of overall power to the design. So all of that put into effect here, I think creates a Pokemon that I'm really proud of. It may not look exactly like Radan, but I feel again like it does capture the energy of that character. And here is Felan, a combination of the words feline, villain, and Radan. This name fully encapsulates the idea of what this guy is. I had the shiny, feeling like Makila had some more rain on the golden mane. The purple wisps in the shiny much more resemble the purple electricity that sparks when Radan uses his weapons. With the lore of Radan being a combination of Moog, himself, and Makila, I have this classification as the bonded Pokemon, and made him electric steel type to take into account his electrified weapons and his plated armor. However, I have it that he does learn quite a few ground attacks as well to reference his stomping that causes the earth to rise during the fight. His custom ability is Gravity Down, where he is able to bring his opponents to his level and force a more aggressive combat. At the start of each turn, it pulls all opposing Pokemon down, reducing their speed by 1 stage and preventing them from switching out. Additionally, Flying-type Pokemon and those with Levitate lose their immunity to Ground-type moves while this ability is active. This thing is a powerhouse. Standing at over 20 feet tall, I wouldn't want to take this thing on in a fight without collecting a few upgraded weapons first. That's for certain. But I suppose that if you held onto your Master Ball for the whole game, waiting for an opportunity like this, you may also be in a pretty good stance. But with that, we are done with these 2 designs, but that doesn't mean that we're done with the series. I have a lot more projects to get through, including our exploration of the Kostawis region. But if you think of any games or franchises worth turning into Pokemon, you let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. That always helps me understand what it is that you guys love seeing. If we get enough likes on this video, who knows, I may spur on to do something for the Living Jars or Rolana. I've been toying with some designs for both of those, and I don't know how far I'm going to make it into the process, but if I come up with something and you guys show some appreciation for these types of videos, who knows, we may see those come out sooner than you think. And with that, we spoke about the socials already, so it sounds like you know where to find me until next time. Bye.